Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Tristan and you're watching Simply Aquatic. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys all the secrets that I stole from Asia. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'd probably already know that I was recently privileged to go and travel Southeast Asia and countries like Singapore and meet up with some of the most influential people in the shrimp keeping hobby. Not only did I have really insightful discussions with these guys, but I also got to steal quite a bit with my eye. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you go and check out those videos. I highly recommend it as they're super informative. But for this video, we're specifically going to be talking about all the tips and tricks that I copied from them and implemented into my own setup. I've had amazing success with the results after making these changes, and I'm going to show you everything that I did so that you can do it yourself. Okay guys, so to get started, the first thing that I want to take you through is my Neocaridina rack. Now, dare I say it, but I've actually finally completed this rack. We've got the fish up at the top, and we've got all our racks populated with fish tanks and, well, shrimp tanks. And the number one thing that I changed here that I want to focus on as the start of our list is the substrate dividers or the substrate separators, whatever you really want to call them. I need to send a big shout out to Lawrence Lee from Shrimp Hub Singapore. He's the one that put me onto this. I think it's an absolutely fantastic idea. And it's a really simple one at that. All you need to do is cut yourself a little piece of glass. I did it on the cheap. I didn't actually install this in the tank. I did it while the tank was running. So I basically just cut a piece of glass, wedged it in with some cut up sponge, and then just siphoned out all the additional substrate that was in the front of it. So basically what this does is it allows you to have a space in the front of the tank where you can put your food and you can lure all your shrimp to the front. It makes it really easy to catch them, to cull them, to manage the shrimp in the tank. What I also really like about this is that it makes it so much easier when you've got customers coming to buy shrimp, to allow them to pick their own shrimp. You know, I think personally that's half the fun, is being able to pick your own shrimp and put them in your tank. And this makes it super easy to do that without having them pull up your plants and mess with your substrate and stuff like that. So that's generally the idea and the reason why Lawrence does this in his tanks, because he runs a retail shop. But for me, there's actually two parts to this. So besides the fact that it makes it easier to catch and manage your shrimp, what I really like about it is that it also creates an additional surface area for green walls and biofilm to grow. And I really like this because since implementing this in my tanks, I've actually seen an increase in baby survival rates. Like my Bloody Mary tank that I'll show you guys over here, it's absolutely crazy. I've actually never seen this many shrimp in a 60-liter tank before. I think it'd be an understatement to say that I've got a couple hundred shrimp in a 60-liter tank, and it's kind of unheard of. Like, I haven't seen that before in my own tanks, which has been amazing. And I don't know if I can directly contribute the success to just this mod alone, but it's definitely helped, and I can say that with confidence. So all in all, it's a super cheap and really easy mod to do, and I think it looks really cool, especially in a shrimp only breeding tank. So I highly recommend that you guys try this out for yourselves and see if you have the same results as I did. Next thing that I want to talk about is my filtration. Now, for my regular viewers, it might not look that different. I'm still running sponge filters, 2 of them per tank. However, what I did change was I ended up changing to the bigger version of the sponge filters. So we used to have the small little mini ones, and now I'm running the 2822s, the XY filters. The main reason for doing this for me personally was actually just to prolong the time between maintenance. So with bigger filters and bigger sponges, they can run a lot longer before they get clogged and you have to clean them. But the other thing that I did was to increase the filtration rate and to increase the rate of aeration in the tank. And the way that I did this was by using these little 3D booster or 3D printed booster attachments that basically replace the original engine housing of the filter. I will do a bit more of an in-depth video on how to maximize your filtration, but basically this, the larger filter, and then the hang-on back clips, I've designed all of these myself and 3D printed them. If you guys want to do that for yourselves, if you have access to a 3D printer, I will link all the 3D bits and pieces down below, so go and check that out. I've posted them for free. You guys can print them for yourselves and upgrade your tanks. But this is probably my second favorite mod that I've done on the Neocaridina side, because it really has just made maintenance so much easier for me. Next up, I want to talk about lubile bags. And this isn't necessarily something new. I've been using these for a very long time. I've been using Ocean 6's locally made lubile bags. I've also used a couple that I was gifted from Shrimp Hub in Singapore. They work absolutely amazingly. They make tons of biofilm. They're really good for the beneficial bacteria. However, something that I learned when I was traveling was that a lot of the breeders don't actually use these just to provide additional food sources. Now that's generally how I used it. I would put one in a really big tank with a lot of shrimp, thinking that this would help keep the equilibrium, make sure that there's enough food available, extra biofilm, stuff like that. However, what the guys in Asia are doing is they're using it to cycle their tanks. So instead of just using bacteria powder and trying to measure it and dose it every time you do a water change whilst you're setting up your tank, they actually just chuck one of these bags in, and it makes so much sense because it takes all the guesswork out of it. If you end up overdosing your bacteria when you cycle your tank, more than often you're going to end up with green water. And it's not really like the end of the world for a Neocaridina tank, but it's a real pain when it happens in your Caridina tanks because you really have to get rid of it quickly. Otherwise, it ends up using all the nutrients that's stored in your active soil. So this is a change that I've been making and testing. This is one of the tanks right here that I've actually set up with absolutely nothing at all besides that bacteria bag. I set this up about 3 weeks ago and we've already added some shrimp. They're doing great. The green walls are looking amazing. And I think it's specifically because these bags are designed to not only grow biofilm, but also release ammonia slowly over time. And I definitely can say that 9 times out of 10, if you're going to set up a tank this way, you're probably going to have success with growing green walls. These bags are not only designed to grow biofilm, but they also release ammonia, and it's just been fantastic. And I mean, as you guys can see, a lot of these tanks were reset recently. That's why for some of my regular viewers, you'll notice that the tanks are looking super empty. It's because we reset a ton of these tanks and we reselected our lines from scratch to improve the quality. But at the same time, you can see all the tanks that have been set up now for over 3 weeks, they're all looking beautifully green and lush. And even the ones that we set up quite recently are doing quite well. They're already going green, and that tank I set up about a week ago. Personally, for me, the green wall is more of an aesthetic choice, but it does directly contribute to the survivability of your shrimp. I highly recommend that if you guys have access to lubal bags, that you try and cycle a tank with one and see what kind of results that you can get. So the last thing I want to talk about for the Neo side before we move on to the Caridinas, which is very, very exciting. There's like quite a bit happening here. I want to talk about the lighting. So in one of my previous update videos, I think I did share with you guys that I had increased the amount of light. So I doubled up on the amount of lights that I had. I've got 2 rows on each side now. But very importantly, I've made some serious changes to the timing and schedule of these lights. So essentially, I used to run quite long photo periods, so anything between 8 and 10 hours. At one point, I was actually running 12 hours of light, which was just a little bit too much. What I've recently changed it to is running a dual day schedule within the same day. So essentially what this looks like is my initial lighting period starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. So 8 o'clock, the lights come on, they will run for 4 hours until 12 o'clock, and then they'll switch off again. They'll switch off till 5 o'clock, and then on again till 9 o'clock. So essentially what this does is it gives me an 8-hour photo period with very strong lighting because I have added a ton of extra light on each of the racks. However, it breaks it up. It gives the shrimp some time to rest. It gives the room some time to cool down, which is also very important because we're going back into summer now and handling heat in this room has been a bit of a challenge for me before. But it also makes it really, really easy for me to manage the room because when I wake up first thing, the lights are on and I can actually manage the room. I can come in, I can feed the fish, etc. But then it also gives a break and allows me to work again late at night, which works really well for my schedule on a personal note, but it also gives the shrimp some time to rest. And I'm not particularly sure what the science is when it comes to this. I've just spoken to a couple of breeders and many of them run their lights this way. They have a dual photo period in the same day and they've noted really good results. And it's not something that they just talk about. I'm talking about tanks that I've seen with my own eyes with some crazy shrimp, really good success. So it's definitely something that I would recommend you try and experiment with if you have the capability to do so. If you're running really strong lights and you want to run a bit of a longer period so you can spend more time with your tanks, break that period up into 2 different segments. Alrighty guys, on to our Caridina tanks. Now there's quite a lot that's going on here, even though it looks kind of empty. I think the first thing that I need to mention for those of you that don't know about the tank update that I've done, I've gotten rid of all my original tanks. So what you see here are all proudly Caperi built tanks. The reason I went for this is just for better filming, and obviously I wanted the guarantee on the glass. So these tanks all come with a 3-year warranty, which is really, really nice. So it basically just protects my most important livestock, and I know that I've got a really good finish on these tanks, and they're quite secure. There's nothing wrong with these tanks. I just, you know, my OCD also, I mean, look how beautiful this glass is. Right, so the first thing that you can probably notice is that I've got a couple of bigger tanks. Please ignore the mess. I'm still busy. This is currently my workspace, but I'm still busy getting this rack sorted. But essentially what I've done here is I've built some larger tanks as my grow out tanks. So essentially they're exactly the same spec as my 2 foots. I've just doubled them over. So these are technically 4 foots, but they're just deeper. They're not as long as a 4-foot would be. So the dimensions are 60 by 60 by 35. And whereas my other tanks are just, you know, 30 by 60. I really, really like the setup of these tanks. They're looking really, really good. I've got them set up now and they're busy cycling. So I can't speak to the success of them yet, but I've seen many other breeders run their grow out tanks a bit larger. The idea behind this is that you give the babies a ton more grazing space and a lot more space to move around, so you can house more shrimp, plus you increase the growth rate of the shrimp. And I'm very excited to see the results of this once I actually get some shrimp in here. Next up, looking inside the tanks, one of my favorite mods that I've done is updating my UGF filters. I really like using UGFs because they just make so much logical sense. Having the water pass through your substrate is going to really increase the rate at which it buffers. It gives you much more stable parameters, and adding sponge into the UGF has made a massive difference for me. So big shout out to Calvin Wong from KW Shrimps. He's the guy that gave me this idea. Essentially what this is allowing you to do is house a ton more beneficial bacteria, not only helping to prevent clog the UGF, but also giving you much better and more stable parameters. The other thing that I really like about this is that even though my pH is staying exactly the same and it seems that it's just as stable as when I use a lot of soil, I'm actually now able to save a ton of money because I'm only using 1/3 of the soil that I used to, which has been a massive savings for me because I'm obviously running quite a few of these. One other thing to note is that I've boosted all the filters in these tanks like I have with my Neocaridina tanks. And additionally to that, I've also boosted my UGFs. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. Essentially, normally your UGF runs just straight, you know, a pipe with a air stone. And I really didn't like how that worked because the air stone kept getting clogged. And even when it was running nicely, it would actually block the amount of flow that could come through the pipe because the stone was in there in the first place. So essentially what I've done is I've used the booster design, just increased it a little bit, added it to the sort of the filter mat or the bottom piece of the UGF filter. And then what I've also done is at the bottom, I've cut out the internal little circular there, that kind of filter grate. I've just cut that out completely. And what this has allowed me to do is pretty much quadruple the amount of water that is coming out of my UGF filters. And so the main reason that I did this wasn't only it wasn't initially to boost the UGF efficiency. It was actually just to make sure that it wouldn't get clogged so quickly, and again, you know, reducing my amount of maintenance that was required. However, the added bonus was the fact that it just really increased the flow rate and the amount of water that's able to pass through the UGF, which can only be a good thing. Obviously, your parameters are going to be buffered a lot faster. They're going to be kept more stable, and you're going to be able to filter that water quite a lot faster with additional flow rate through the UGF. One other thing that I've done, you'll notice, is that I've added black vinyl to the bottom of all of my tanks. The main reason for doing this, I stole the idea once again from KW. If you go and have a look at that video, the main thing that he speaks to is that shrimps will end up reflecting their backgrounds. You know, they'll sort of try and blend into their backgrounds. So when you've got white and bright, lighter sort of colored backgrounds, you could end up with a situation where your shrimp color, you know, the performance of the color is actually affected. So going with a black background not only enhances their color, or, you know, makes them stand out a little bit more, but it also helps the shrimp feel a little bit more safe and secure. So I've ended up going ahead and just changing that on all of my tanks. What this also allows me to do is make a much thinner layer of substrate. I used to have a relatively thick layer of substrate and a UGF box, Now, even with the sponges in the UGF, I'm using half the amount of soil that I used to use. You'll notice in the front here, there's actually quite a few sections where there is no soil covering the bottom of the tank. And this is obviously an intentional change. The main reason for that is to try and prevent ammonia buildup and detritus buildup. With a super thin substrate setup, you know, the water is able to get everywhere. You're able to run that water through the filtration, and as a result, you're going to end up having a cleaner tank, and you also minimize the amount of risk when it comes to potential ammonia spikes. And so last but not least, we have got the moss table. Now, this isn't really revolutionary or groundbreaking in any way. It's just very exciting for me because it ticks quite a couple of boxes where I've had issues in the past. So essentially what this is a platform that you can tie your moss to or connect your plants to, raise them up off the substrate, not only getting them closer to the light, so allowing them to grow a bit faster, but also increasing the water flow throughout that moss or throughout that plant. Once again, allowing it to access more nutrients, again, increasing the growth. But the main thing for me actually is that it provides a surface area where the shrimp can feel safe. They still feel like there's cover. And like you guys can see in this tank over here, there's a ton of them actually hiding underneath this moss table, so it provides a sense of security. But the main reason that I do this is to prevent ammonia spikes. With shrimp tanks, we're only running moss, generally because it's just a very easy plant when it comes to maintenance. However, the one issue that you can end up facing is where you have something like a shrimp or a snail dying within that moss, and because of the lack of water flow through a really dense piece of moss, you could end up having an ammonia spike that is isolated within the tank. And that can be really dangerous because you could experience the symptoms of ammonia spikes like dead shrimp, but when you go and test the water in the tank, it actually shows that there's no ammonia because that ammonia has been isolated to that specific spot. And by using a moss table, raising that moss up off the ground and actually getting water to flow through it, you negate that risk completely. You can also make them yourself. You know, there's many different ways to create a moss table. The one that I'm showing you here, I actually designed myself and 3D printed. I will put the link down below so you guys can copy that file and go print it for yourself. Well guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I am definitely going to be doing more sort of in-depth like fish updates on all the other stuff that's happening at Simply Aquatic in the future. The whole point of this video was just to show you guys some real-world applications of all these tips and tricks that you regularly see on YouTube, you don't always see in practice. And I really hope that this has been able to give you guys a bit of a perspective on that and that you can use some of these tips and tricks in your own setups. And as always, guys, if you did enjoy this video or find it useful, please consider leaving a like. It helps it reach other people that are interested in the hobby. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on future videos. And if you already have, you're awesome. Continue being awesome, and I will see you guys in the next video.